I want you to be more curious. Be more curious about everything. Do not be content with what I tell you about God. Do not be content with what another person tells you about God. Be curious. Find it for yourself. Desire God for yourself. Experience God for yourself. Seek God for yourself. Explore God, your ideas of God. Experience God for yourself. Learn God. Be in a relationship with God. Have a relationship.
Good day, beloveds. How do you do? Welcome to Talks from the Heart with Mandy, brought to you by Agape Wellness Coaching, a place where being begins at root. I am Mandy, a spirituality teacher and transformational relationship coach, as well as founder of Agape Wellness Coaching, and I'll be journeying with you talking heart to heart.
Welcome once again, beloveds, to yet another episode of Talks from the Heart with Mender, where we explore the depths of spiritual and mental wellness, as well as personal growth and self-discovery in relations. I am your host, Mender, still journeying with you, talking heart to heart. In our previous episode, we explored one's relationships with God and others, and as promised, today we're going to further discuss this exploration. Please grab your favorite beverage and get as comfortable as you can. Let's get back to our exploration, and whilst you're at it, please like, share, and subscribe. You can also turn on the notifications so as to not miss our future episodes. Now let's get back to the business of the day. Now, following our previous discussion, you may still be asking, why are relationships so complex? Why are relationships so complex? Considering that we are naturally a social species, how is it that we're having difficulty relating? Now, please share with me in the comment section below what you think about relationships and what makes relating so complex. What do you think about relationships, and what do you think makes relating so complex? For some very odd reason, most of us think that relationships are more complex than they really are. Somehow, most of us think of relating to God and or with others as something more complex than it really is. But the truth is, there is really nothing complex about relations except our perceptions of what we think relationships are and should be, or even our expectations of the people we relate to and with, right? So our relationships, as complex as we make them out to be. See, for far too long, we have been taught that we are separate from God and each other, when in fact, we are all whole parts of a greater and even more complex whole, that is the Creator and creation in its entirety. Well, I don't know whose brilliant idea it was to teach people that they are separate from God and each other. I don't know whose idea it was, in as much as we want to say, oh, Adam and Eve falling from grace and committing original sin and all of that is what separated us from God. You realize that from the very beginning, God had a plan to reunite, or rather, to keep humanity in oneness with Him, or herself, depending on what your belief system is, it's him or herself, right? God never separated himself or herself from his creation. But for some reason, some brilliant character came up with the idea that we are separate from each other and from God. And I don't know what about this being separate from God and each other makes relating so complex, but it does. But it need not be, because once one awakens to the understanding and knowledge that we are in harmony, in unity with God and each other, we exist in oneness and function in oneness, one can only realize that we have never been separate from our Creator and His creation. Well, I'll simply put it in this manner. When one considers how all of creation, and that is humanity included, was created and continues to function in oneness with each other, one can only come to the conclusion that all of creation is one with its maker. The creator is in creation and is part of his or her creation, just as the created is in the creator and is part of the creator. Now, while it is important for one to know and understand that they are one with God, others, and all of creation, it is important that one remembers that oneness with God does not make them equal to the Most High God, but rather that they are a very important whole part, like all the other whole parts of this magnificent God. The Most High can be without you, but you are limited without the Most High. It is very important that we realize that as whole parts of this magnificent, greater, more complex whole, we cannot be without this magnificent whole. We cannot be without this magnificent God who is the greater whole, the greater consciousness. But this greater consciousness can be without us. We are a whole part of this whole and complex consciousness that is so magnificent in its being, and we are all contributing to it. And our oneness is what makes all things function in oneness and harmony. And in our oneness with God, each other, and all of creation, we are. Okay, now you may be thinking, how does one go about simplifying their relationships so as to enjoy more fulfilling relations? Well, you may remember that in previous episodes, I have without fail emphasized that one's relationship with oneself sets the tone to every other relationship in their life. Every other relationship outside of one's relationship with oneself is a reflection of their internal relationship. Every other relationship that one has outside of one's relationship with self is a reflection of what goes on internally. How one treats themselves, how one relates to and with themselves is reflected in how they relate to God and others. Yes, your internal relationship sets the tone for all other relations. Now, as one tries to navigate the relationship with God, one cannot help but start questioning, who is God? What is God? Right? One may sit with this question, who and or what is God? Well, God means different things to different people. And due to our varied belief systems, the idea of God is varied from person to person based on their background. Things like environment, culture, and traditional beliefs that influence their social frame of reference and identity may have a huge impact on who and what a person may think God is. And without imposing one's understanding of who and or what God is in one's life, it is imperative that we take into account that just because we are in proximity to each other, it does not necessarily mean that we will have the same shared understanding and knowledge of who and what God is. For some, God is the Creator, Father, Savior, and a lot more. Whilst for others, God is the Creator, Mother, Father, Universe, Creation, and a whole lot more. Right. Now, no matter your belief systems and or ideas of who you think God is or what you think God is, it is important to understand that most of us believe that he or she is the beginning of creation, the Creator. To a point, we all agree that this Creator is one God, is the same God for all of us, the Most High, who is above all others. And this is even carried through in polytheistic belief systems. Polytheistic belief systems have many gods, but they also understand that there is that one that is above all, the Most High. And again, these differences are influenced by various factors, but for the most part, most of us agree that there is a God who is the source and creator. No matter our ideas of God, there is only one source, creator. God can be nothing and everything simultaneously. He or she exists in all things, the seen and unseen alike. In nothingness, he or she is there, just as he is in everything that is. God is infinite, personal, and most of all, he or she is all that was, is, and forever shall be. He or she is in all of it. Nothing is without the essence of God. He or she is higher than all of creation. That is God, and that is according to me. But you may also have your own understanding of who and what God is to you, right? And I want you to explore that. God is spirit. And the reason I say God can be nothing and everything simultaneously is that even in nothingness, the essence of spirit exists. See, we don't see the air, but we know the air is there, right? The unseen realms, the spiritual realms, we know it exists, but we don't see it. We don't all see it. Some of us can see it, but some people have not experienced it to a point of seeing it, even though it impacts them, right? God exists there too, in the unseen realms. In what we deem nothing, God's essence remains there. I want you to explore God, your ideas of who God is. It doesn't end here for me. Who God is does not end with the explanation I just gave. No. In fact, every day I seek to know God. I long to know God. I want you to be more curious. Be more curious about everything. Do not be content with what I tell you about God. Do not be content with what another person tells you about God. Be curious. Find it for yourself. Desire God for yourself. Experience God for yourself. Seek God for yourself. Explore God, your ideas of God. Experience God for yourself. Learn God. Be in a relationship with God. Have a relationship. Get to know God for yourself, not the ideas of your pastor or whoever else, or your mother or your father. Explore. Get connected with God. Understand your oneness with God. He or she is not some distant being that is far away in the blue skies, waiting for Judgment Day or any other event to happen before he or she reveals himself to you. No, the essence of God is in you. God is in you. God is with you. God is one with you. And if you remember that, you'll get to know God on a more personal capacity, on a more personal note than just the ideas of others, the experiences of others. As I said, God is infinite, yet personal. And most of all, he or she is around you, in you, with you, sharing oneness with you, being one with you, in oneness, in unity and harmony with you. I want you to remember that as you explore God, as you try to know who and what God is, remember that. And of course, one may not get to know all of God, but when one seeks God, God makes himself or herself known to them. Now, again, as we try to relate to others, as we navigate our relationships with self and others, we sometimes are burdened with the question, who are we? What am I? Who am I? Who are we? Well, I'll simply say we are fragments, fractals of souls in physical form. Remember I said God is spirit? Well, we are fragments, fractals of souls in physical form. We are beings created in the likeness of Elohim, of God. We are the essence of souls in physical form. And this is something that most of us have refused to grasp, even when the sacred texts are telling us so. It is as a father and mother having children. These children, though they be whole individuals, they are still the manifest essence of their father and mother, yet they are whole parts of the whole that is the union, that is love, the consciousness that is the father and mother. We are whole parts of an even greater and complex whole that is the source, God Most High. We carry in our physical nature the great essence of source, the divine. None of us is greater than the other. We are all whole parts of source. We are part of the divine, and he or she is part of us. We are in him or her, and he or she is in us. Yes, the divine is greater than all, but all that is important to remember is that we are the various facets of the divine, the Holy One, exercising his or her expression in physical beings through the various gifts and talents and purpose. See, collectively as whole parts in unity, we are the divine consciousness, God, source. But also remember that source remains divine. And source, even without some of its fragments, remains source, lacking nothing. But the fragments can lack without source. Remember that even though we be the essence of the greater whole, of the great divine one, we are not greater than the Most High, but we are one with him. Now, as again we try to relate with each other, as we try to relate with God, and now coming to the understanding that we are the essence of God in physical form, one may be asking, why would this magnificent God want to leave the lofty heights of being to this lower plane, which is the physical plane? You may also wonder why we are here. Why are we here? We all have those moments of wondering, why am I here? Why are we here? We are here for one reason and one reason only. That is for God, the divine source, to have his or her personal expression through practical experience through our humanity. We are here for source, divine, the divine God, to have his or her personal expression through practical experience in and through our humanity. We are the various fractals of God that came here to have a certain expression that is made manifest through our talents, our gifts, as we live out our purposes here. We're having practical experience that is a personal expression of the varied nature of the divine. Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Where are we from? This may also be one of those questions that one's grappling with as they embark on their spiritual journey in search of meaning. We are the creation of the divine, right? We are the creation of God. We are fractals of the divine, little pieces of the divine. We are born of God, by God. We are from God. Now, philosophies vary from culture to culture, but most agree on the fact that we are born of the Most High. We are children of the one who was, is, and forever shall be, the beginning and the end. Now, you may still be there thinking, well, what does knowing answers to all these questions do for me? How does it make relating easy for me as a person? Well, remember in the previous episode, I spoke of going back to basics, which is maybe considering the universal golden rule as a guide that can help us better relate to one another. See, when one knows who they are, who God is to them, and who their neighbor is, one such person treats relations differently. By the time one understands who they are as a being, who God is to them, who their neighbor is, why they're here, and all of those things, then it becomes easier for one to understand the golden rule. It becomes easier for a person to understand the golden rule. It then makes the golden rule make more sense than it used to. The saying, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. This universal golden rule, along with Mark 12:30-31, provides an ethical framework for communal living. Some people who are not from the Christian background may not be familiar with the Gospel of Mark, but the words of this particular passage are common theme through and across cultures and spiritual traditions. Now, for some of you who are not familiar with the scriptural passage that I'm talking about in the Gospel of Mark, these are the words of Yeshua of Nazareth, where he was approached by a teacher of the law who heard a discussion, and he saw that Yeshua had given the Sadducees a good answer, so he came up to him to question him, hoping to test him, hoping that Yeshua would fail. And he said, which commandment is the most important of all? Then Yeshua replied and said, the most important one is this: listen, Israel, the Lord our God is the only God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. He then said, the second most important commandment is this: love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. There's no greater commandment. There's no other commandment more important than these two. And of course, for us Africans, we have heard similar commands, I must say. It's just, it is not in a structured religion type of way. We knew to love our neighbor as ourselves, to consider our neighbor as ourselves. We believe that God is in our neighbor and God is in me. So if I'm loving my neighbor, I'm loving God. If I'm loving nature, I'm loving God. If I'm loving me, I'm loving God. If I'm loving myself, I'm loving God. So loving God with everything you have has always been an important part of being for us. It has always been a very important way of being. And if you, again, are not familiar with these words, they are common themes throughout cultures where it is taught to love God above all else, and loving your neighbor as yourself, and doing unto your neighbor as you'd have them do unto you. You would not hurt your neighbor if you love them. And upon these two very important commands hinges all other commandments. You cannot steal from your neighbor if you love them. You cannot kill your neighbor if you love them. You know, as you see God in them, it's very unlikely that you'd want to harm them or do anything that will hurt them. If you love nature, you do not do things that are contrary to preservation thereof. So our communing with God and relating to God is and was sin in how we treated nature around us, how we treated each other as people in said communities. For us Africans, some of the philosophies that are packaged in religious packaging were in fact our everyday way of life. They were our day-to-day way of life. The very principles we see today as being called the commandments of the Lord that are now Moses' framework of communal living were in fact our forefathers' way of life. And for us Africans, spirituality was not separate from our everyday life. Every hour, every minute of life is spiritual. See, for us Africans, being alive, breathing, and just being the being one is created to be meant that one is living out their spirituality. It meant that God's spirit is living and enjoying personal expression through a physical being that is having a practical experience on this physical plane. Just being who you are as a person and in your relationship with God, others, and even environments, we were spiritual and living life at the same time. We were being spiritual and living life at the same time. Just living life for us is spiritual. There has never been a distinction between life and spirituality. Being alive meant being spiritual. You know how other people will say, oh, do not spiritualize everything. It doesn't have to be spiritual. You know, it's just nothing. It's just very light. You're making everything about the spiritual. Well, for us Africans, there was never a distinction. Any action, any thought, any word is and was spiritual. Sadly, when religion was introduced to our continent, it took away from us our oneness with God. It took away from us the understanding of who we are as people, our oneness with each other, our oneness with nature around us, because religion introduced to us a concept that remains foreign to this day, and that is what is causing all the problems, that is causing all the complexities when it comes to being relational. Religion, when it was brought to us, it was introducing a God that is very far from humans, a God that is disconnected from humanity. See, we didn't know of God being distant. We didn't know of an angry God. We didn't know of a God who does not commune with his people. We didn't know of a God that lives somewhere up in the skies. No, we have always been aware of God being in our midst and in us. We were one. But when religion then came in, when religion was introduced to us, it brought with it an idea of a God that is separate. It brought in this idea of separation from God, separation from each other, separation from nature. It just didn't hold, even when it was supposed to be about love. It just didn't hold people together. It separated people. It separated us from who we are as individual beings, as communities, as members of the whole. And what's very sad is that when one takes a closer look at most of these philosophies that are packaged in religion, they are mostly ancient philosophies, ancient African philosophies. By African, I mean Egyptian included, not excluding it. Ancient Babylonian philosophies, ancient Oriental, Asian philosophies, philosophies from all over the world, including those of the Greeks who stole from us as well, who stole from all over the place. Yeah, all those philosophies somehow formed married by somebody. They are an amalgamation of various cultural philosophies that have absolutely nothing with the religion that is being sold to us. But that is a political thing that I don't need to be discussing. I'm just trying to say that the structures in place may very well be the reason we separated. They may very well be the reason we don't know how to relate. But if we go back to ourselves and going back to basics and taking an even closer look at what we're being taught, we can see that some of these things are deep in our spirits without even going through the writings. Whilst the philosophies of the various cultures were never meant to separate us from our God and from each other, somehow we managed to be separated by the structure that was formed using these very philosophies. When one takes a closer look at the Beatitudes, and of course the commandments of Moses on communal living, one can see that this is practically ethical framework for communal living throughout the world. Well, one can see that this is how people lived their every breathing moment across cultures. As people from various cultures across the world, we believed that the essence of God dwells in all living things, and that at any time God could and would present himself or herself to us in any given form through anyone or anything. Therefore, respect and love for all things was how we lived life. So when I say let's go back to basics, I mean let's go back to being who we are as people. Let's perhaps consider retracing our steps. Try to learn from the ancient teachings of our forefathers. And as much as there's religion today, I want us to go back and understand what framed religion as we know it. What brought on the ideas that are there about God. One needs to interrogate the idea of who God is and what God is. One needs to interrogate the idea of what a relationship is and isn't. A lot of things, a lot of ideas we have are based from our frame of reference, yet we have no idea of the foundation of that frame that we're looking into. One has to research and study as to how the frame of reference came to be, what it is and how they can change what does not serve them on their journey to being who they are and who they're created to be. Let us dig deep. Let us dig deep within us and learn more from others with the understanding that we are one. We are one. It is nobody's fault. Your neighbor's fall is your fall. Your fall is your neighbor's fall. Your rising is your neighbor's rising. Their rising is your rising too. We are one. And when we relate from a place of understanding our oneness, we relate better. What I would not want to have done unto me, I would not do unto the other. In my expression of being, I will love my neighbor as myself because I am, because they are. I am because God is. I will love God with all my might, my strength, and my being. Because in my loving God, I'm loving nature, I'm loving my neighbor, I'm loving all that is, was, and forever shall be. In my loving myself, I'm loving everyone and everything. So when I relate well in my internal space, I'm setting a healthy foundation for my relating with others. When I know and understand who God is, when I know and understand that God is not outside of me, not separate from me, when I know and understand that my neighbor is not separate from me, we are one. When I say your neighbor, I'm not talking about just the person next in the next door, your house. No, your mother, your daughter, your husband, your boyfriend, your colleagues at work, those that you meet along the highways you're driving to work, fellow shoppers as you shop in for groceries. All members of humanity are your neighbors. Everyone. Your neighbor isn't just the person that occupies the flat next door or the house next door. No, everyone. Let us remember who we are and live in harmony and oneness with each other. So my time for the day is gone. I'll just have a quick recap. How to better relate, or rather what we discussed today. Let us know who we are. Let us try to know who we are as beings. To try to know who God is and what it means to have a relationship with God. 3, understand that you and your neighbor are one in oneness with God. the divine source, whatever you call God. Remember that one's relationship with oneself is the foundation of all other relationships. 5. God is not somewhere out in space. God is not somewhere out in space writing books, keeping score of what we're doing right or wrong. God is going through this life with you and in you, guiding you through all the twists and turns, the good and the bad alike. God is with you. 6. Knowledge of who you are and where you come from. Now, I'm not just speaking about you knowing who you are and where you come from just as a being that is a whole part of an even greater and complex whole, but also note that it is very important that you know who you are and where you come from in the context of your society, your family, and culture. This will help you better understand the ideas and identity you've assumed without question. Remember, some of us are carrying inherited baggages. We're carrying inherited confusion. And when I'm saying inherited confusion, I mean imparted confusion. We don't necessarily understand the foundation of our frame of reference. And for that reason, we are carrying with us baggage that no longer serves us as beings that are blossoming in our spiritual journey. So it is imperative that we seek out to understand who we are as a people from the roots of where we come from, as in our culture, our ethnic backgrounds. We need to understand those things. How we as beings have come to understand life as we understand it, how we've come to a place of acting the way that we act in, how we respond the way that we respond. We need to understand all those things. Some of them are cultural influences. Some of them are inherited from our families, because especially for us Africans, there are spiritual nuances that most people may not necessarily understand, but we know the impact of not knowing who we are, right? So it is imperative that we know who we are, as where does our family come from, their background, all the way to the root of the tree. You know, the foliage is nice to look at, but it is important to go all the way back to our ancestors and understand what they believed and how they practiced what they believed, and work our way forward to the evolution that we see today and understand the journey that it took for us to get to where we are. This will help us better relate with each other. This will help us better understand and appreciate our differences as whole parts of an even greater and complex whole. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed spending time with you, and be on the lookout for the next episode as we continue our discussion of one's relationships with God and others. As we continue on this journey, I hope that you remember you are worthy of the light that is in you. Remember, you are the essence of God in physical form. As we continue on this journey, may we be guided by curiosity, compassion, and a willingness to delve into the depths of our being in exploration of the wonders that lie within. Remember that it is through this exploration that we may come to know ourselves more fully as we relate to God and others, and even living life of meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. It is through this exploration that we really get to shine. We really get to experience ourselves, our potentials. It is also through this exploration that our personal expression and practical experience becomes a light that shines the way for us and others in this life's journey. Now, once again, in our next episode, we will continue our journey exploring our relationships with God and others. I hope you tune in as we continue to journey together, talking heart to heart. Also remember that this podcast show is available to you on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, and of course our website at www.agapewellness-center.com. Like, subscribe, and share. Tune in again for more. My beloveds, I had a wonderful time here with you. but it is time for me to love you and leave you. This is your host, Mandu, signing out until the next episode. Shalom.